Hello everyone. Have you ever wondered what to do with your sourdough starter when you're going on vacation? Or maybe life has gotten busy and you just need a break from baking. The good news is this: you don't have to throw your starter away and you don't have to keep feeding it every day. Today I'm going to show you exactly how to store your sourdough starter in the refrigerator the right way. We'll also talk about how to prepare it before it goes into the fridge, what it will look like when you take it back out, and how to wake it back up so it's ready to bake beautiful sourdough bread again. If you're new to sourdough, don't worry. I'm going to explain everything step by step in a simple way. So let's get started. When should you put your starter in the refrigerator? The refrigerator is a perfect place for your starter if you're going on vacation, you won't be baking for a while, you just need a break from feeding it every day. Keeping it in the refrigerator slows everything way down. Your starter stays alive, but it doesn't need nearly as much attention. Think of it like putting your starter in sleep mode. What will you need? Well, before we begin, gather a few simple things together. Here we go. You'll need a clean jar. You'll need a kitchen scale. You'll need your sourdough starter. You'll need the flour you normally feed it. And you'll need room temperature water. This gets more exciting as we go along. I feed my starter with bread flour because it works great. But feel free to use whatever flour you normally use. The important thing is to stay consistent. So here's step number one. Keep just a small amount of your starter. First, place your clean jar on the scale. And we got to set the tare on this so it'll weigh properly. Now we want to transfer about 20 grams of our starter into the jar. So let's see what happens here. Well, that's 9 grams. That's 17 grams, 18 grams. Now we're up to 19. Well, let's see if we can squeeze a little more. Now we're at 20. Okay. Now, don't worry if you only get in 18 grams or you accidentally put in 22 grams. Don't worry if it's just 18 grams or if you happen to put in 22 grams. It does not have to be perfect at this point. The rest, as you can see here, will become discard. Now, you can throw the discard away or you can save it in another jar in the refrigerator as a backup. That's completely up to you. Now we're ready for the next step. We're going to give it one last feeding before we put it in the refrigerator. So before your starter goes into the refrigerator, we're going to give it a good meal. We all like a good meal before we go to bed, don't we? But today we're going to feed the starter a little bit differently than you're probably used to. You probably feed your starter equal amounts of flour and water. And we're going to do it a little bit differently. This time we're going to make it a little thicker. Okay, first thing we want to do is add 3 heaping tablespoons of flour. Got my flour here. Got my tablespoon. Heaping 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to add a little bit of room temperature water. Next, we're going to stir everything together really, really well. And I want to use my spatula for that. And I need to add a little bit more water. Now we'll explain all this in just a little bit. Want to make sure that all the flour gets stirred up and everything mixed in well with the starter that's in there. And this is still a little too dry. In fact, it is dry. I think we pretty well got it where we want it. And I'll explain all this in just a minute or two. You may have seen other recipes online or in books that use exact measurements like equal parts flour and water, like 100 grams of flour to 100 grams of water, or 1 cup flour to 1 cup water. That method works, but today I want to show you my approach, which I learned from another baker on YouTube. Making a starter by eye is what we're talking about. Yes, by eye. No scale, no measuring cups, and no complicated math. The goal is texture, not numbers. What matters most is the texture of the mixture. Instead of measuring exact amounts, add flour and water gradually until you reach the creamy mousse-like texture that we're looking for. And you saw me adding water 2 different times, I believe it was. And here's the mixture we're looking for. You see that? Nice and thick and smooth. It's smooth, it's creamy, and it holds its shape without being dry. Now, if your mixture is too thin, add a little more flour. If it's too thick like mine was a few minutes ago, add a little more water. Do not worry about overmixing it. You actually want all the flour completely mixed into the water. The finished starter should be nice and thick, almost like smooth peanut butter or even tomato paste. That's exactly what we're looking for. Now, why do we want to make it thicker? And you may be wondering this, why we're using more flour than water. And here's why. When your starter is in the refrigerator, everything slows way down. The wild yeast eats much more slowly. By making the starter thicker, we're giving it extra food that lasts longer while it's resting in the fridge. That little change helps protect your starter during its vacation. Now, want to remind you, use a large enough jar when you're doing this. You saw the jar I use normally. It always holds enough when it's grown to make one loaf of bread. But we need to remember that, well, simply put, the next tip can save you a huge mess. And that's what we're trying to help you with. Even inside the refrigerator, your starter can and will rise. It won't rise as quickly, but it can still grow. If your jar is too small, your starter may bubble over the top and make a sticky mess all over your refrigerator. Trust me, you only have to clean that up once to learn your lesson. Choose a jar that's at least twice as big as your starter, and that's what I've done. A little extra space now can save you a lot of cleanup later. Now, want to remember, this is ready actually to go into the refrigerator. Let me clean off my spatula a little bit here. There we go. And we'll go ahead and close it up, and we want to be sure and seal it tight. And I've got it tight for when it goes in the refrigerator. This is one time when you do want the lid tightened securely, and I'll explain to you why. When your starter is sitting on the kitchen counter, we usually leave the lid loose so gases can escape. But in the refrigerator, we want to keep the starter from drying out. A tight lid also helps keep refrigerator odors out of your starter. Now, let your freshly fed starter sit on the counter for about 30 minutes. Well, we're just going to leave it right here for about 30 minutes. You do not need to wait for it to double in size. Just give it a little head start before placing it in the refrigerator. After those 30 minutes, put it in the back of your refrigerator. That's my wife setting the timer so we'll know when 30 minutes is up. Then you can go out and enjoy your vacation, or simply take a well-deserved break from baking. Your starter will be waiting for you when you're ready to bake again. Now we want to take a look at how to store the sourdough starter in the fridge. What happens while it's in the refrigerator? Now that your starter is safely in the refrigerator, let's talk about what's happening inside that jar. Here's the first thing I want you to remember. Your starter is not, N-O-T, your starter is not dead. It just takes a long nap. The cold temperature slows the wild yeast and good bacteria way down. They don't stop working, they just work much slower. Think of it like a bear during winter. It isn't dead, it's just resting until it's time to wake up again. Kind of like what we're explaining is hibernation. We're going to let our starter hibernate for a while. What will the starter look like? The longer your starter stays in the refrigerator, the more it will change. After about 2 weeks, you may notice a small amount of liquid on top. After 1 month, there will usually be more liquid. After 2 months, you may see quite a bit of dark liquid sitting on top. If you've never seen this before, it can be a little scary. You might think, oh no, I've killed my starter. But don't panic. Most of the time, everything is perfectly fine. But what is that dark liquid? That liquid does have a name. It's called hooch. H-O-O-C-H. Hooch. Hooch is simply a mixture of water and alcohol that forms after your starter has eaten most of its food. The darker the hooch becomes, the hungrier your starter is. So don't think of it as bad news. Think of it as your starter saying, hey, I'm ready for another meal. That's all it's trying to tell you. Is hooch mold? This is one of the biggest questions beginners ask. The answer is no. Hooch is not mold, even if it's gray or dark brown or almost black. It's usually just hooch. That's completely normal after your starter has been sitting in the refrigerator for a while. Real mold looks very, very different. We'll talk more about mold later in this video. Next question is, should you stir the hooch in or pour it out? See, there are 2 ways people handle hooch. Some bakers stir it back into the starter. Others pour it off. Either way works just fine. I personally pour mine off. Now here's why. Hooch has a very strong smell and a very sour taste. It's made up of mostly alcohol. If you stir it back into your starter, that stronger flavor can carry over into your bread. I prefer a cleaner, milder flavor, so I simply pour the hooch into the sink or trash before feeding my starter. If you like a stronger sourdough flavor, you may choose to stir it back in. There is not a right or wrong answer to this question. It's simply personal preference. What will the starter look like? Once the hooch is gone, stir the starter gently. At first, it may not look very exciting. It may seem flat, thick, and almost lifeless. That's okay. Just remember, it's been sleeping in a cold refrigerator all this time. It has not had fresh food in possibly weeks. Do not expect it to bounce back instantly. The important thing is this: it is still alive. Now, all we have to do is wake it up. Warning, warning, warning. Don't bake with it yet. This is one mistake I see many beginners make. They pull the starter out of the refrigerator, see that it's still there, and immediately start making bread. Can you do that? Well, maybe. Should you? Probably not. Your starter is hungry. It's weak, and it has not been active for a while. Using it right away often leads to bread that does not rise very well. You may end up with a loaf that's heavy, dense, or even flat. After waiting several weeks to bake, Nobody wants that. Instead, take just a little extra time to wake your starter up properly. Your bread will reward you for it. Now your sourdough starter is safely tucked away in the refrigerator, and you know exactly what's happening while it's resting. So don't worry if you see hooch or if your starter doesn't look very active. That's completely normal. In 2 weeks, we're going to take this same starter back out of the refrigerator, and I'll show you step by step how to wake it back up, how to feed it properly, and how to get it strong enough to bake another beautiful loaf of sourdough bread. 2 weeks ago in part 1, we prepared this sourdough starter and placed it in the refrigerator for a well-deserved rest. Well, today is the day. We're going to take it out, see what happened while it was resting, and I'll show you exactly how to wake it back up so it's healthy, bubbly, and ready to bake another beautiful loaf of sourdough bread. Along the way, we'll answer some common questions like, what is that dark liquid on top? Should I stir it in or should I pour it out? How do I know if my starter is still alive? And how do I get it ready to bake again? If you've ever wondered about any of those things, you're in the right place. So let's get started. Here's our starter. This starter has been resting in the refrigerator for the past 2 weeks. Let's open it up. Ooh, it's got liquid floating on the top. And it's pretty clear, and there's not a whole lot of it, so I don't think the camera will pick it up, but it's there. Now, if you've seen something like this before, don't panic. This is completely normal. That's right, it's normal. We call that water hooch. Now, what is hooch? Hooch forms after your starter has eaten most of the food we gave it before putting it into the refrigerator. It's mostly water and alcohol that develops during fermentation. The longer your starter stays in the refrigerator, the more hooch you'll usually see, and the darker it often becomes. That doesn't mean your starter has died. It's simply giving you a message. It's saying, I'm hungry! I'm hungry! Think of a little child asking for something to eat. At first, they ask politely. Then they ask again. Pretty soon, they're reminding you every few minutes. That's exactly what your starter is doing. The hooch is simply your starter's way of saying, please feed me. Another question, should you stir it in? One of the questions I hear all the time is, should I stir the hooch back in? The answer is, you certainly can. Some bakers like the stronger sour flavor the hooch produces. Personally, I pour mine off. You see, hooch has a very strong smell and a very acidic taste. I prefer a milder flavored bread, so I simply pour it down the sink. Either method works. It's simply your personal preference. But listen closely, don't bake with it yet. Now look at the starter. It doesn't look very active. There aren't many bubbles. It looks pretty sleepy. That's because it is. It's been resting in the refrigerator for 2 weeks. It's alive, but it's hungry. This is one mistake many beginners make. They pull the starter out of the refrigerator. They mix it into the bread dough, and then wonder why their bread doesn't rise. See, before your starter can make great bread, it needs a few good meals. So let's wake it up. First thing I'm going to do is pour this hooch out of here. I've got a little glass jar here, and I'm going to pour the hooch into it. It's not clear, but it's not real dark. And there's just a little bit there, but I still do not want to stir it up into my starter. Let's open up our flour, and we're going to place a couple spoonfuls of this flour, this is bread flour, into our starter. Heaping spoonfuls, tablespoons. Now then, we're not weighing anything today. One of the things I love about sourdough is that people were making wonderful bread hundreds of years before anyone owned a digital kitchen scale. Now, let's continue. You may ask, why bread flour? And the reason, as we've said before, we use bread flour is that it is full of starch. Those starches become food for the wild yeast and the good bacteria living inside our starter. They've been resting for 2 weeks. Now it's time for breakfast. In fact, they're so hungry, I think what I'll do is add one more spoonful of the bread flour. Now, I'm going to add a little bit of water, and we're going to stir it. Now, we're not going to make this one quite as thick as we did before when we were putting it to rest, because we want this to get ready to bake. A little bit more water. And that's the great thing about working this by eye. We get it to the consistency that we're looking for. And we've almost got it ready. That's almost the right consistency. I think I will add just a little bit more flour, because I want it a little bit thicker than what it is. There we go. I'm going to wipe off our spatula just a little bit here, lay it to the side. And remember, we want at least lukewarm water. If you want to warm the water up, get it somewhere between 85 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. You just want a certain, forgot my words. We just want to make sure we have a certain consistency here. So when I add warm water, make sure it's warm, not hot, just comfortably warm. In fact, if you don't have a thermometer to measure it, what you can do is pretend you've got a baby's bottle and check it with your skin like you would a baby's bottle. Hot water can damage the wild yeast. Warm water helps wake it up. Now we have everything stirred together. Make sure that it's the proper consistency, not runny like pancake syrup, not stiff like bread dough. Think of a real thick cake batter, or maybe even chocolate pudding. That's the consistency we're after. If it's too thick, you can add another splash of water just like we did. If it's too thin, another spoonful of flour, which you watch me add some. Remember, your eyes are the best measuring tool that you have. Next thing we do is wait. We're going to put the lid on this, and we will put it into a nice warm spot so that the wild yeast and the good bacteria will begin eating again. And when they begin eating again, they'll start growing again, and they will start bringing your starter back to life. But remember, you can't stop here. Keep feeding it. Don't stop after just one feeding. For the next 2 days, morning and evening, repeat the same process. So we fed it one time here, and later on today, we'll feed it again. And I want to remind you that sometime during the next 2 days, you'll probably need to discard some of your starter, and that's perfectly all right. You want to make sure you keep room in your jar for your starter to grow. But for 2 days, morning and evening, you need to repeat this process. Take a couple spoonfuls of starter if you want to put it in a separate jar. If you want to keep the jar like I am here, again, you may have to pour some of it out. We call that discard. And then add 3 heaping spoonfuls of bread flour. Then add enough warm water to bring it back to that thick, creamy consistency. That's all there is to it. Every feeding makes your starter a little stronger. Now, what should you expect? After the first feeding, you may not notice much. That's perfectly normal. After the second feeding, you'll probably begin seeing bubbles, maybe a little rise. But the third feeding, your starter should become much more active. And by the fourth feeding, it should be bubbly. It should be healthy. And it should be doubling in size after each feeding. That's when you'll know it's ready to bake. What if it's still slow? If your starter still seems sluggish after several feedings, do not panic. Just keep feeding it. If you'd like to give it an extra boost, replace one of those 3 spoonfuls of bread flour with a spoonful of wheat flour or even rye flour. Those flours contain extra nutrients that wild yeast absolutely loves. Think of rye flour or wheat flour as an energy drink for your starter. After a few feedings, once your starter is healthy again, simply go back to using bread flour. Now, we've talked about hooch, but there's also mold. Is there a way to tell the difference? Yes, there is. And we want to do that before, or explain that, I should say, before we finish today. Let's clean up one important question. Hooch is a liquid. It may be clear like mine was today. It may be gray. It may be brown. It can be almost black. That's perfectly normal. Mold is completely different. Mold is fuzzy. It may be white. It may be green. It may be blue, or it could be another color. If you ever see fuzzy mold, throw your starter away. Let me repeat that. If you ever see fuzzy mold, throw your starter away. Don't scrape it off. Don't try to save it. Start over with a fresh starter. Thankfully, that happens very, very rarely. Well, there you have it. As you can see, bringing a refrigerated sourdough starter back to life really is not difficult. It just takes a little fresh flour, a little warm water, and a little patience. Before long, your starter will be bubbly. It will be healthy. It will be ready to bake another beautiful loaf of sourdough bread. I hope this 2-part series has helped you feel more confident about taking care of your sourdough starter. Remember, your starter doesn't mind taking a vacation. Feed it, put it safely in the refrigerator, take your break, wake it back up, and start baking again. Sourdough should be enjoyable. It shouldn't feel like another chore. If this video helped you, I'd really appreciate it if you'd click the like button. If you're enjoying these beginner-friendly sourdough lessons, be sure to subscribe to Alan's Sourdough Adventures and click the notification bell so you never miss a new video. I'd also love to hear from you. How long have you ever stored your sourdough starter in the refrigerator? Leave your answer or your questions in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy baking and God bless.